Welcome to the Leverage Your Potential podcast. This podcast is hosted by the Director and Assistant Director of Menlo College's Office of Internships, Career Services, and Study Abroad, Dylan Houle and Kelly Davis, in partnership with Menlo's Content Creation Club. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Leverage Your Potential podcast. I am your host today, Kelly Davis, the Assistant Director of Career Services and Study Abroad, and I'm really excited to be interviewing today a good friend of mine, Laura Madden. She is the Regional Director of the West Region at CEA, one of our Study Abroad partners, and we've been working together for about a year and a half now. It is such a pleasure knowing you, Laura, and getting to bounce ideas across each other. And we've just had a lot of fun trying to get students at Menlo to study abroad and figure out the best ways to incentivize students to make them feel comfortable. So I'm really excited to have Laura with us today to talk a little bit about studying abroad. We're going to start with her own career journey because it is really interesting, and I think that students will get a lot from it. So I'm hoping we don't linger too long on that section, but Laura has a lot of different experience. So I do want her to share all of that. And then we're going to launch in some more study abroad related questions. And hopefully that will also be beneficial to our students, prospective students and the like, as they might be considering study abroad opportunities or even working abroad. So without further ado, Laura, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and about your relationship with Menlo College.
Yes, of course, Kelly. Thank you so much for that introduction. I too have had so much fun working with you and kind of bouncing ideas. We're really, we kind of like to bounce off each other a lot. We work really well that way, and it's been very fun and a pleasure working with you at Menlo College. So yeah, just a little bit about me is I'm originally from Chicago, but I'm living in LA at this point in time. I've been here for 2 years, and I've been working, with Menlo College in that year and a half, 2 years through this line of work that I have, which is the Regional Director for University Relations at CEA, which essentially CEA is a study abroad organization that provides study and intern abroad experiences to students. But we partner with Menlo College, and essentially my job is to make sure that you and your students have the information and tools you need, and actually what they need, which is most importantly, in order to decide if a CEA program is right for them, if study abroad is right for them, and if so, which one, because there's so many options available. So it has been really fun, and Menlo College is actually one of my most unique partners, I would say. The students that we've had, I think we've had about 6 or 7 students in the past, and honestly, they are the incredibly focused and bright students. And going on campus, there is such a strong and palpable sense of community there. And I wouldn't say that it's just because you're one of the smaller institutions, and I'm saying smaller because of the relative size to your peer universities, because I would say 800 students or some 800 plus students is a lot of students to have that feeling of community on campus. And I love going there, and I love talking to your students when I have that opportunity, and it's a great institution. So I'm really grateful to be here on your podcast and to talk a little bit about me, but then also study abroad, and looking forward to that. So thanks, Kelly.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that intro. We always love having you on Menlo's campus, and fingers crossed we see you there soon.
Yes, exactly.
For anyone who's listening in later down the line, we are recording this in late April of 2020. So we're amid the coronavirus, and everybody's chomping at the bit to get back to campus and have things open up again. We'll probably have to be a little bit more patient, but that's okay. Yeah. I'll be really interested to know how I look back on those words.
Yes, what's going to happen when we get to listen to this? Where will we be?
Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
Well, we're gonna go back in time for a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
Laura, you got your bachelor's degree in international relations, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about why you chose this degree and where it ended up leading you on your career journey.
Yeah, I actually appreciate that question because I'd say I didn't really choose international relations, but it sort of found or chose me. I was that typical college student who went to college because I knew it would be better for me. I wanted to go, but I had no idea what I was going to do. So through my interest in politics and culture and histories of other countries, the courses I took early on in my undergraduate studies actually dictated my international relations major. It's one of those kinds of advising aha moments where your advisor says, you only need X amount of credits in order to have this major. So it was kind of this path that I was led to. And you say, where did it lead you to in my career? And honestly, it wasn't really a career field for me. I had no idea what I was going to do. I really could have used the services of a career center like yours at Menlo College, where you have all sorts of tools available to you and resume building and mock interviews. But then, of course, your internship program, which is amazing. I really could have benefited from something like that, but that wasn't really available. So this was in early 2000s. I graduated in 2004. And if it was available, it wasn't readily available. I didn't really go searching for it. So without that, my degree was really basically a conduit for teaching me how to think and how to learn and understand a myriad of perspectives that has actually served me really well in my career in international education. But I think that actually serves anyone well anywhere. So I'm grateful for that opportunity. But again, if you were to have talked to my 19, 20, 21-year-old self about the career I was going to have, I would have liked where I end up now, but there's no way I would have been able to describe that for you.
Absolutely. I really resonate with that because I was a European studies major, and it was a very similar thing, which I think is a very lucky position to be in, where you aren't necessarily thinking about exactly what that degree is going to be leading you to. And it's also one of the debate points, I feel like, of what is the value, what is the purpose of higher education? Is it to give you those skills and to be able to think, and does it really matter exactly what it is that you are studying, or are you supposed to go on and know exactly what your employment is? And I had a very similar experience where people would ask me what I was going to do with that major, and I would retort, whatever I want. And so yeah.
But that's great. That's exactly what you should say. That's how you should feel, right? I'm going to do whatever I want to do.
Yeah. And I think that we have the advantage to do that in the way that the United States structures, at least at this point, and we'll see how that changed. But anyway, whole other podcast topic for sure. I think what's also interesting about your educational journey from that point is that quite some time later, you went back to get your MBA, actually. So what motivated that decision to go back to school and specifically get the MBA?
Yes. So we were talking about my 20-year-old self, and if you told my 20-year-old self that I would be getting an MBA, I would not believe you because I was not in that frame of mind. It's just not, I just wasn't there. But the question is a very simple question that is actually a complicated answer because, as you said, I started my MBA program in 2015, or you said later, but that's when I started it. And as I said, I graduated my undergraduate in 2004, so there was quite a bit of time in between for me to get to that point. So I'm going to try to simplify this answer as much as possible without giving you my whole life story. But essentially, I actually have been in international education for quite some time. And even though I've been in international education, I've been exposed to different kinds of strategies, business jargon that I believed that a degree in business would actually help me quite a bit. I essentially saw an MBA as a way for me to get a seat at the table, and I'm doing air quotes because I wanted to understand what decision makers think about when they are thinking about businesses or strategies and how that works in that area. I basically kind of thought, what is my biggest weakness right now as a professional? And I went to get a degree in that is how I had looked at it. So, wanting to learn more about what businesses need to think about, ranging from a CEO of a multinational company to even an entrepreneur starting a small company out of their parents' basement, which is actually how CEA got started. Our founder started it in his mother's basement in Chicago 23 years ago. So things happen.
Yeah,
and you never know. Yeah.
That entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes.
For
And
sure.
obviously I'm working there and it's a great family feel to it. And I'm grateful he did that because I love my job and I love what I do. And if he didn't do that, then I would be somewhere
Right.
else. And perhaps not talking to you right now. So, kind of goes to those things of what is that? The butterfly flutters its wings
or the ripple effect or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I just jumped into wanting to learn all of that. I was working at DePaul University for 5 years, and during that time, that's where I had gotten my MBA. So I was able to work and get my MBA there. And I would also probably say that everything that I learned is now possible to learn through a book or through Coursera or something where you don't have to pay for it. But I wouldn't have had the guidance of my professors, and also kind of going back to the sense of community that I feel when I'm on Menlo campus. You really get that feeling when you're in a program, the MBA program, but any kind of cohorted program that's in grad school. So I really appreciate that. And I think that made a difference in my learning and success.
Definitely. And I think that kind of speaks to a follow-up question I was thinking of asking, which was, what did you accomplish your goals through attending that MBA program? Did you feel like you learned what it was, those gaps in what you felt like you were missing?
Yes, I would say yes and no, in the fact that yes, I have the base foundation knowledge of the things that I was trying to work for, and especially these days in what we were just describing. I don't know when we'll be listening to this, but we're in the middle of COVID and we're trying to understand what the future of a study abroad organization like ours is going to look like. I can draw upon information that I have from my graduate degree in the MBA program that I rely on, and I understand more about what those kinds of intricacies would be as opposed to not having that. And that's what I'm grateful for. But there's really nothing that replaces experience. And I think even if you get a degree in something, to go through it yourself and to understand those kinds of nuances of what these principles are, and then seeing how they are applied in the real world is again kind of paramount. So I would say yes. The answer to your question is I did get what I wanted out of it, but I'm still learning. I'm using that as a foundation to learn more.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's really, I'm going to be chewing on that one for a while, so maybe I'll pop back and revisit it later.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. That's great.
Because I just think it's important whenever we are considering school, even if it's our first round of bachelor's degree, but especially a continuing education program, whether it is a master's or a PhD or whatever, what are our goals, and is this actually going to fulfill what our goals are? So
yeah,
and it helps us assess the programs we want, and having some experience, I think, too, helps us figure out what those next steps are. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So now I'm going to dive into the study abroad specific questions. So we're going to go back in time again. And where did you study abroad while you were in college? What were some of the most impactful things that you learned from that experience? How did they impact you?
Yes. Another full question that's loaded with all sorts of information I can provide.
My favorite question.
And I know, yes, and one of mine too, actually, obviously from where I'm working, but in general, because it's very personal to me. But Yeah, so thank you for that. And I will again try to simplify the answer because I know that we don't want to be here for hours on end. So I will try to keep it limited. But yeah, where did I study? I studied abroad 2 times when I was in undergrad. I studied abroad for a summer in Mexico. And then I went to Madrid, Spain for a semester and a summer. I was actually, in addition to my major in international relations, I had taken a major in Spanish. So those were the reasons why I was going to those locations. I also actually did do a field research program that I did in my MBA in Cuba. So I have technically studied abroad 3 times. So twice when I was an undergrad and once when I was getting my MBA. But in every instance, that I went abroad to live for a period of time, I was blown away by the disparity in my perception of what that experience was going to be like, and then what it turned out to be. So, I'm a bit of a romantic when it comes time to like travel the world and experience other cultures and people and around the world, and all of that is like very inspiring to me. And you kind of paint a picture of what that's supposed to be like before you go, right? So when you get to live in a country, you're not just visiting. You get to learn about the nuances of that culture and the people and the structure that make the city what it is, and you get to start to kind of peel the layers, that idealized layers of what you had kind of put that coding around what that experience is going to be like, to actually get to the meat of you're doing it. As I had said earlier, you're experiencing it, you're going through that. And to be able to reflect and understand what's happening around you, I think is really important. And when you're doing a study abroad program, as opposed to just visiting, you have the space and time to do that reflection. So, culture is fascinating to me. I think it is fascinating to most people, but not all. But it's everywhere, right? So you have microcultures and mass culture. And to learn how to pick up on the nuances of how people think and feel and express themselves differently, I think is a skill set that I learned at an exponential rate when I was abroad. I continue to try to hone those skills and learn them, but I'll always be grateful for having the opportunity to learn that early on while abroad.
Definitely. That's so interesting. When I studied abroad in Berlin, I remember I did not do much research on the place at all for,
Right.
I guess I wanted to be surprised. So I maybe had heard, oh, Berlin doesn't look like every romantic European city, the one that you classically think of, like Paris or Rome even, or anything like that. But it was such a cool surprise anyway, because I didn't look up pictures. And so I remember being on the shuttle between the airport and the housing and looking around and being like, where am I? And
Yes, exactly.
it was so funny because I had broken my foot, actually, or sprained it 2 days before leaving. And this was a semester-long program,
Wow.
so it was going to be okay. I wasn't able to do anything that first week and a half, but it's okay. I had many weeks left over. But I always think about it in terms of how that really shaped my perspective of how I began seeing the city, because it started off so small, literally just a little, a block maybe, because it was winter time and I was on crutches, and so but it expanded out from there, and I began to, but it was cool because I got to know a little section and start to take in those nuances that you're talking about, just almost like one little crutch at a
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that is so fascinating to think about, to be able to have that, your experience being kind of, that micro experience of step by step. But I don't know if at the time you were thinking that you were being, it was that you were losing out really of by being on these crutches, or if you were able to just realize that this is your experience and almost having that ability to slowly get into it the way that you did is
I think
maybe a
that
fortunate thing.
right. I think I definitely felt some frustration, but I knew that there was plenty of time left, and it was really just the orientation week. So, all right, I didn't get to my first experience at the club out until 6 a.m. Don't try this at home, kids, wasn't that week, but you learn other things. You learn, wow, I'm glad I'm in Berlin and not in New York City, because they actually have elevators at every subway stop here.
There you go.
So it did offer new perspective. Anyway, to circle back though, I think it's great what you're talking about, that ability to really get to know a different culture, really get to know different people. It's something that we have to do every single day in the workplace, in school, and it's so important. So I think that's a great lesson, and one of the perhaps most, I don't know, I don't want to say jarring, but you'll notice the biggest differences by going somewhere where the language is different, like you're saying.
Yeah. But also I would actually argue that when the language isn't different, kind of going back to those veils of idealized layers, kind of peeling back and understanding what that experience really is on the inside, I would say that students we've been finding and are more shocked when they're in an English speaking culture because they're not expecting it. And I don't know, there's not like more or less, but maybe it's just they felt like everything would be the same. And you have those, what we're talking about, nuance, where even though we're speaking the same language, these things mean different things in these different countries. And obviously word choice, and again, kind of talking about how you express yourself. And the British are quite sarcastic but reserved, and they're not, there's ways that we communicate sarcasm that's very differently than the ways that the British would communicate sarcasm. So those things I think are equally important when you're talking about understanding where the other is coming from, where they are coming from, and how do you navigate that without just bulldozing over it with your own way of thinking and doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
great insight. That's really interesting to me. It's making me reflect on going to Ireland and spending 6 weeks there, things of that nature. So
I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah, for sure. So after you went and studied abroad in places where you were speaking Spanish, and Spanish is going to be a theme here, because after you graduated, just a couple years afterwards, you ended up working abroad for a few years. So what was that like, and how is it a bit different from studying abroad?
Yes, that is also a great question. You're on a roll with these good questions that you're fielding. So yes, I did work abroad after I graduated. It was actually about 5 years after I graduated. And I had, in that 5 years, started working for a state senator in Chicago. And I hated it. I did not like the job. I didn't like the role. I was feeling like in a little bit of a rut. I missed, I went to school for international relations and spoke Spanish, and I didn't really have that in my atmosphere, in my world at that time. So I ended up getting a TESOL certificate to teach English abroad, and was able to.
And hold on, Laura, can you explain what a TESOL certificate is?
Yes, I will. Yeah. So TESOL is an acronym for Teaching English as a Second Official Language. And getting a TESOL certificate is an official program course that you take. You don't get a degree, but you get a certificate that proves that you are able to teach in a classroom English. Now, it's not a teaching degree, but some places require that for certain, if you're going to teach English in a proper secondary, primary educational institution. But for a certificate, I was able to get a job in Buenos Aires, Argentina, to teach English through a company who would be contracted by various businesses to teach their business executives English. So because I had that certificate, I was able to get hired by them to do that. So that job was not kind of top of my list of what I wanted to do, but essentially they were the first ones to get back to me and had a job ready for me at the time that I wanted to go. I was ready to go, and so I took them up on it, and here I was on my way to Buenos Aires, Argentina, to teach English to I went to business executives that needed that skill set in order to do the business that they were doing in Argentina. So I was really excited, and quit my job and was able to train somebody on the senator's work, and they then got on a plane and got out. And I absolutely loved it, but it was so hard. It was one of the more, we're talking about what the differences of a study abroad program and working abroad. And a study abroad program, what CEA is offering and what a program I was on is that you have people waiting for you on the other side. You have people there specifically to show you where your housing is going to be. You have an orientation. You get to meet people right away and kind of understand what life is going to be like. And I had never been to Buenos Aires. I did some research, and I did know somebody. They weren't a friend yet, but I did have somebody there that I could, ask to have a cup of coffee with after I got settled. But ultimately, it was all on me, and I thrived in that and wanting, because I knew I wanted to be there and wanted to make it work. But the Argentine peso is, Buenos Aires, Argentina is a very expensive place when you're making the Argentine peso. You bring your American dollar, it's great. So, it was a hustle. I was hustling it was up to me to get the jobs that I needed. And I was on trains and going from place to place and making ends meet. And I was fortunate enough to actually be introduced to a group of people while I was there that did introduce me to a post-production company that needed an American to do translating work for them. So this was about 6 months into doing my TESOL work with the businesses I was working with. And I met with them, and they had a job ready, and I was able to actually stop teaching within a week of meeting them. They got to hire me, and then again I had to get someone to take over my teaching responsibilities. But it was just like this wonderful opportunity, because it was actually, the job was for this reality TV show that was going to be aired on the Latino MTV channel, called MTV Space. It's like the Latino MTV. And it was an experience that I never would ever have if I had never gotten my TESOL certificate and moved to Argentina and said yes to the things that made me nervous, and trusted my instincts and judgment. And then I got to work for this really cool post-production company for the last 8 months that I was living in Argentina, making much more money. And I got to experience Buenos Aires the way that people dream about Buenos Aires. You get the meat and the wine and all that stuff. And life changed pretty drastically. And I actually ended up making long-lasting friends during that time. And I don't know, it's just, an experience I'll never forget and will be never taken away from me. And I'm really happy and grateful for that opportunity.
Thank you for sharing all that. It's such a cool story that you have there. And I'm just trying to process. I had so many questions come up. But I hear what you're saying about, I think that it does take a certain person to be able to go out and do those things. Especially, yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to move to, I've never really put an effort into trying to move to another country, but I could not imagine doing that without having had some sort of international experience.
Yeah,
prior to that.
totally agree. Yeah,
And
I
I
agree
think
to that.
and I think that that's the advantage of being able to take advantage of a study abroad opportunity, is because you do have people waiting for you on the other end. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not that you're always going to have people waiting for you on the other end if you pursue work abroad opportunities, just as you experienced. But I do see a lot of the people who go and study abroad, they're a lot more willing, knowledgeable, and ready to kind of make that jump and that move. Not to say that you couldn't, if you had never
Yeah, I
studied
agree with
abroad
that.
before.
But yes, but it probably would have been even harder than
Yes.
what I had experienced. I think so for sure. Because I think I could recall on the times that I felt very uncomfortable and alone and confused when I was in Spain or when I was in Mexico. And I know what it looks like on the other side of that. Whereas if you'd never experienced that before and you didn't have somebody to talk those things through with, which I didn't at that time when I was in Argentina, but I didn't necessarily need it where I definitely needed it when I was abroad on my program when I was in Spain and Mexico. And I think that's really important to be able to have those people that are willing to listen and understand kind of where you're coming from while you're trying to understand where everybody else is coming from.
Well, so we've heard a lot about your experiences, Laura. What about other students? So do you have any stories from students who you've worked with and helped get abroad? Have they reached out to you afterwards to share any of their experiences?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And so many. We actually have a blog that students participate in, and they always want to share what their experiences were abroad through other means. We have that blog, but we also have photography and things, and there's certain kinds of things that some students like to do and others who don't feel that comfortable but still want avenues to share what they went through. And the things that stick out the most to students when they come back are seemingly what we would call the very mundane activities that you would experience while abroad. So they want to explain what their daily walk to class from their apartment was like, the buildings that they'd never seen before, how the food that they were eating and how they want to recreate that food here, but then realizing that even some of the vegetables and herbs and spices we have are very different from what they could find very regularly abroad. The smells of the city, of the town they live in, all those things, the people they want to bring back with them, but no, they can't. All of those things that make a student's experience what it is, that is they're unfortunately we're being deprived of right now in this COVID-19 world. And it's a sad time for those students. I mean, we had students who were abroad who had to get cut short, and just the same as everybody else is taking online courses, they're taking their abroad courses online. It's not the same. So we're hoping we can get back to that place where we are able to go to different places and experiencing them ourselves as opposed to a screen. We'll take what we can get, but
Totally.
there's nothing that beats being there on your own. Yeah.
Oh, right. I've been saying, I think that we're going to need to, even on the university end, we need to figure out virtual engagement opportunities, but it's in no way a replacement for study abroad. It's just a means of trying to get a little bit more exposure and exploring that realm, but it will never fully replace, I think.
No. Yeah, I agree. And that's what I was saying before when we're trying to think about what our place is as CEA, who provides study intern experiences abroad. What do we do right now? And I think our responsibility is to understand how we can continue an intercultural experience engagement with the resources we have. So what can we do with that? And the one thing we saw was virtual internships. So we have ways where companies who need still help, and in this case, a lot of them need a lot of help to get back on their feet. They've got a lot of projects. They could really use an intern. So there is that idea. I mean, what we're doing right now, we can't be together, but we can see each other through this screen, is what they're willing to do and what students are able to do, and it doesn't replace what they would do if they were on site in the business working with them in person, but it is something, and we are able to have those reflective pieces, and there is an online course that goes along with it, very similar to kind of what we're very aligned with what Menlo College does in their internship course. So that was an avenue that we saw that we could still continue that engagement, but again, it's a sad time because it's not the same. You know, you're still getting the experience exposure, but it's not the same as being there. And what is that? They say, like what people would talk about around the coffee machine or something.
The water cooler.
The water cooler. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for that. Yeah.
No, for sure. But I mean, it's interesting because I think with the virtual internships, that's something that is I think will really prepare students for the workplace, because there's plenty of companies that are going to be operating globally and will need to focus on that remote. But I want to put a pause on the COVID-19 related. We're going to fast forward for a moment. We're going to, because there will be a time when we do go back to normal. And so when that time comes, or we could backtrack, you know, maybe this doesn't change depending on if it was before COVID or if it was after, but for students who are nervous to take that first step to study abroad, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, right. Well, first I would say that it's very natural to be nervous. Of course you're nervous. If you're not nervous, you're not thinking about what you're about to do. You're going to be nervous because you're going to a place that is foreign to you, where you don't know the customs and you're going to feel out of place. I think that makes that's a very natural way to feel. I would just say that don't let that get in the way of taking that leap of faith, and that you can understand that growth and that experience where you never would have done it if you let your nerves get in the way of experiencing that. So I would say that it's almost when you're nervous and then you do something despite those nerves, that's kind of where the magic happens, right? Where, you know, you think back like, oh, I was so nervous about that, and now I have all of these memories and these people, and I've learned so much about myself, and those are the times that the best stories come out of and result in the memories that they'll hold on to and build the stories of the students I was just talking about. So it's a journey, and they'll never know what you're missing unless you find out yourself. And don't be ashamed that you're nervous. Everybody's nervous. But again, going back to what we were talking about with study abroad programs, as opposed to just jumping in the deep end and moving to a country, programs are available for you that you can really ease into it, and you have people to show you the way, and it's what you make of it. There's some students are like, yep, got it, I'm done, and then they'll go and I don't need advice anymore, and then they can learn on their own. But then there's other students who really are grateful for every opportunity they can ask advice from, and that's what a study abroad program provides, is staff and native people who are there who could show them how to buy groceries at the market if they need, So, and we do that for the orientation, but then afterwards, there's all sorts of questions to have. So being nervous is natural, but it's definitely worth it once you go.
Definitely.
Is my advice.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to what you were talking about when you did try to go and work abroad, how some of those amazing opportunities really came up because you went into what was uncomfortable and you said yes anyway. And not that we should always say yes, but
right. No, you have to trust your instincts on that for sure. And of course, if there's things you just feel uncomfortable doing, don't do that. But just, I think what I'm getting at is to really understand, is it nerves that I can get over.
Yes.
Let me not just say no every time I feel nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Do I trust myself? Do I trust the people I might be saying yes to, or the situation I might be saying yes to see this through on the other side?
Right. And I think one of those big things that would make us feel uncomfortable or nervous is language barriers. And I
Yeah.
have got to tell the audience, there was one time I had the most meaningful conversation with a Lithuanian man who was born in 1932 on a bus. And we talked, I'm putting air quotes, for about an hour and a half on this bus ride. And I say talked because he knew no English. He knew, Lithuanian, Russian, and a little bit of German. And I knew a little bit of German. And it was the way we communicate. He showed me his ID, which is how I know when he was born, how I know his name, but
Yeah.
we were just communicating that way. And so I think that the things that make
Yeah.
us nervous, when we tackle them, we can realize that we don't have to be as afraid. And that's what the whole process is all about, is being able to find those
Yeah.
human connections even amongst our differences.
Yes. Yes. That is an amazing story. And I love those stories where you realize how much communication you can get done with somebody when you don't speak a common language.
Right.
And I love that. Yeah.
It's
You
one of my favorites.
understand how much you have in common. It's like these things, these gestures, and yeah, that's a really beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So now I jumped onto our next question and then realized that the COVID-19 related one wasn't so far down the list. But I'm going to go back to that for a minute. We know that we're facing challenges, but we have a lot of hope. So do you have any maybe comments or reflections of hope or otherwise that you want to share with the students in light of what we're seeing right now in international higher education?
Yeah, of course. And there's so many people who could say it better than I do, and have other more kind of better things to say about it. But I would say that this COVID-19 is obviously something that we haven't experienced in our lifetimes, and we are really getting a time to reflect on where we're at, what we're doing, what's going to come out on the other side of this. But we have to be hopeful for the future, right? And it has shattered not just study abroad, but of course, small businesses that thrive on the movement of people, not just tourism, but people coming through. It's going to be a different world for us on the other side. We could probably be sure of that. We don't know exactly how. And a lot of people will rightfully be hesitant to want to get on a plane again, but ultimately information and knowledge is power. The only way to find out what the world looks like is to experience it yourself. So even though we can't do that right now, as I was explaining before, we're trying to find ways where we can bring each other together. Virtual internships is one of those things, but other ways that we could try to see how we could still bring each other together. And in the time of isolation, we could really use that avenue. And as soon as there's vaccines and we're able to put out these protocols because we've been through this before and we know what works, that's the time to go out and experience the world again. And I think that we all need it, and we all need to be together again and have the opportunities we did before to be together. Will it look different in the ways that we get there? Probably. We'll probably having to get fever tests and things before we head on a plane. Who knows? But ultimately, once we have those protocols in place, I would say, and my hope is that we don't stop trying to learn from each other. We don't stop exploring, because ultimately you learn so much more about yourself and your own culture when you get to experience others. And I think it's really important.
Thank you for sharing that, Laura. I completely agree. And I think you put it very eloquently. So thanks for sharing that with our audience. It's important for all of us to hear, I think.
Yeah,
So
thanks, Kelly. Yeah.
in light of that, where would you travel now if you could?
And everywhere is not an answer, I guess. I would go
Narrow it
everywhere
down
all
to
at
10.
once.
No.
All at once, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I will just, yeah. If I could travel now, and I'm gonna just focus on abroad because obviously my mother should say I should go and see her, and I would love to go and see her in Chicago.
Right.
I would say, so I'd probably go to Italy, hardest hit country in Europe from this COVID-19 pandemic, and CEA has staff there, and we have centers and friends, and I would want to give everyone a hug and go to the local restaurants and pay for their delicious food. Is basically my answer to that. It's kind of on the top of my head, but yeah, I would want to go to the places that are hardest hit, and obviously I'm giving Italians a hug, which is very American. I guess I should give them 2 kisses.
The cultural nuances.
Yeah, I give a hug and I'm like, my God, don't come at me.
Yeah, I look forward to hugs again all around for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Well, Laura, this has been a really fantastic conversation. And before we wrap it up, we have one more question that we like to ask all of our guests, which is, what are you reading or listening to right now or watching? Pick something that you think is worth sharing to the world.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, I got to pick one thing. I'm reading a lot because obviously the shelter at home provides an environment for that to happen. So 2 things I would say. One is I just finished this book called Atomic Habits. It is nothing to do with studying abroad, but it has everything to do with how little steps lead you to bigger outcomes, and how if you want to look at something that you want to change, or if you want to do something and get better at something, looking at it in its bigger, don't start with the end result, have that as your goal, but every little bit counts to get there, and it's more or less appreciating the process instead of the end result. And I think that's something I have to remind myself of a lot, and especially when we're in this COVID, because we're trying to just get to the end and get to the end and get to the end of it, and when we're not really sure what the end looks like, what can we do now every day to just keep going and to keep moving and to make a difference and try to help out. And I think each day matters, and instead of thinking about what 2021 is going to look like, I think, in April 2020, what can I do? And I think that book taught me that, and I appreciated it for that. So I just finished that one. That was a really good one. And what I'm watching, I'm being a Chicago native, I'm actually into the Michael Jordan documentary that's been coming out. It's a 10-part documentary on Michael Jordan. It seems like super excessive, but we're a little bit into it now, and I'm saying we because I do watch it with my husband, and I have a feeling that if I wasn't married to him, I wouldn't be watching it. But I'm very happy I am, because I think there's also lessons to be learned in there where they're not sugarcoating how much work went into his talent. It wasn't just innate talent. He had to work very hard at it, and it's just a fascinating story, and the success he had, and the mindset that he had to do well. And it's a really positive show to be watching at this time, and I would recommend it to anybody.
Those are great recommendations. I like them both, and we're going to link to those in the show notes, so to speak. So in our YouTube channel description. Yeah. So, well, Laura, thank you so much. This has been a really awesome conversation. Always a joy talking to you, obviously, but it's been really great to have you here on the podcast.
Yes, Kelly, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure, and I'm happy to talk to you at any time too. It's been fun.
And that wraps up today's episode. Our episodes can be found on the Menlo College Career Services blog. That's blog.menlo.edu/career-services/. Thanks so much and have a great day.